Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's webinar series. My name is Ambrisha Frazier, and I am Director of Student and Recent Alumni Relations here. And I'll be your host today. Thank you to all alumni and friends who have made time to join us live. So nowadays, a lot of us are busy juggling work, personal life, family, hobbies, and other commitments, which makes it really easy to feel stressed at times. How do you manage it all? In a few minutes, we'll be hearing a webinar from our featured presenter, Sarah Mork, as she guides us through how to take stress by the reins for the better. This webinar will provide you with an understanding of stress, how it impacts us physically, mentally, and emotionally, and how we can get better taking control of it in our lives. Today's webinar is a part of an ongoing free series being offered by the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, where we're having conversations with experts about career, life, and learning topics. Since we launched the series 2 years ago, we've had over 4,300 alumni and friends join us live, over 12,000 YouTube views, and expansion of our webinar library. Initiatives like this are made possible in part by our Alumni Association members. Thank you. Because of members, we can create powerful opportunities for students and our more than 466,000 alumni around the world. You can make our global alumni community stronger than ever by joining as a member today. If you're interested, check out umnalumni.org/membership. This webinar is being recorded today and will be viewable afterwards. From the umnalumni.org/virtual website, we link to our Alumni Association YouTube page and our Goldmine website where our recordings live. I'll also send the video link to all webinar registrants after the event. We have additional webinars coming up featuring some wide-ranging and engaging topics. See them all and sign up at umnalumni.org/virtual. And for those of you who are recent alumni in the Twin Cities area, we have an Emerging Professionals Network event coming up next Thursday, November 10th. So if you're in the area, come network with other recent alumni and hear from 3 alumni speakers on how technology is impacting our everyday lives. Check out umnalumni.org/events for more information. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to listen over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your GoToWebinar panel and dial in information will show up for you. If you experience any audio difficulties while listening via your computer speakers, this can usually be caused by having multiple software applications open, which can use up your computer's bandwidth and affect your network performance. Feel free to close out any unnecessary applications on your computer. Questions are definitely welcome, and you may submit them at any time during today's webinar. Please type your questions in the questions pane on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll be monitoring the questions along the way, so please submit your questions, ideas, or tips. This is going to be a great conversation, and we definitely want to hear from you. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker. Sarah Mork has worked with companies and institutions ranging from the University of Minnesota to United Health Group to the YWCA in a coaching consulting capacity. Sarah has also worked as a certified personal trainer in these roles. Sarah is also currently in the process of building out her very own health and wellness consulting and coaching company around health and wellness called Insight Health and Performance LLC. Sarah is an alumni of the U, and having received her bachelor's in kinesiology and entrepreneurial management, Sarah loved the U so much, she came back to further her studies, completing her master's program in exercise physiology this year.
All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you here that are here too. In a moment, we'll talk about stress and how busy you are, facing demands from family, friends, work, taking an hour out of your day. It's not always an easy thing. It can actually be really, really difficult. You're probably trying to multitask right now while you're watching this, maybe doing emails or chatting or something. But by focusing here for just about an hour, hopefully you'll have some key takeaways that you can use to help kind of reduce the stress in your life, or for that stress that you cannot get rid of, learn how to better manage it so that it doesn't affect you as negatively. So as I said, we're going to be talking about stress here today. Stress seems to be one of those unavoidable features of daily life. I mean, just think for a moment, how often do you hear someone at home, at work, remarking that I am so stressed, or my stomach hurts, my head hurts, any of those physical or psychological symptoms. So today we're first going to talk a little bit more about stress, learning how it affects us psychologically, physically. Then we're going to dive a little bit more into really the interplay between mind and body as it relates to stress. And then finally, ending up, we'll talk about ways that you can actually take action to reduce the effect that stress has on you. Because you can't avoid it, but you can at least change how you respond to it. So first here, a few statistics to get us started. These are the top cited sources of stress, according to a recent study conducted by the Statistic Brain Research Institute and the American Institute of Stress. So I want you to take a moment and look at those. Try to figure out which of those sources, maybe more than one, are your top stressors. Do any of them stand out? Maybe you're using this webinar as a way to kind of escape some of your job-related stress. Tuck away into an office, get away from people a little bit. Or I think all of us could say that media overload, politics, is something that we kind of could use a break from right now. So we're going to pull up a poll here in just a moment where you'll be able to select your top sources of stress, just so I can know a little bit more about you and what really affects you. All right, so you should see a poll here. You should be able to select among 5 different options here. See, we're seeing a lot of jobs, school pressure. So we'll give you just a few more seconds here. I think we have a pretty good response, about 70% of you out there so far. All right, so it looks like, at least for us, job and school, huge source of stress. Of course, that doesn't minimize any of the other ones too, money, health, relationships, nutrition. I want you to keep that in mind because later on, as we talk about ways that you can really combat stress, you'll want to know what's your source so you know how to best kind of battle that stress in your life. So here, a few more statistics on stress to get us started. I won't read them all off because you can do that here. But basically, the key takeaway is that stress is a huge thing in our lives. We have physical symptoms, psychological symptoms. A full third of people feel like they're living with extreme stress. And that's something that obviously is going to affect us day to day. Looking specifically here at physical symptoms, I want you to try to see how many of these you feel on a daily basis, ranging from fatigue, headache, upset stomach, feeling dizzy, changes in appetite, either out of control appetite or minimal appetite. And we're going to pull up another poll here in just a moment. Of these 5 options here, I'm going to have you rank your top physical symptom of stress. And maybe you don't even realize that these are due to stress too. You might think that it's due to some other condition, that you have migraines, that maybe you ate something that didn't sit well with you. In reality, it could actually all be stress related. All right, so it looks like fatigue. Yep. Kind of that whole tired or wired feeling where you wake up and you literally cannot get out of bed. It takes 10, 20 minutes to just pull yourself out of bed. And then at night you're wired and you can't fall asleep. That's stress related. That's due to hormone dysregulation and all of those problems. So if you feel that, it's definitely something here too. Then finally here with our statistics, psychological sources of stress or symptoms of stress, irritability or anger or feeling nervous, a lack of energy, feeling as though you could just break down and cry, kind of where your eyes are starting to tear up and you have to go tuck away into some corner so that you don't completely break down in front of everybody on those really difficult days. So just like before here, may I have you rate those. Of those 4 different symptoms, which one do you notice most often? Right, so it looks like irritability or anger, lack of energy, feeling nervous. And I know you could only select one, but you may experience all of these. So again, it's just really important to know how you manifest your stress so you can recognize when you're under a lot of pressure and the steps that you can take to kind of alleviate that. All right, so take a break from pulling here. We're going to get into some more information. So hopefully you do not feel like this right now at your desk, but stress is a big burden on us. It literally feels like a weight on our shoulders that we cannot get rid of. To start off here, stress is not just one thing. There are actually 5 different distinct stages of stress that you go through, all the way from alarm, resistance, potential for recovery. If you're unable to recover, then you go into adaptation. In this case, adaptation isn't a good thing. We'll get into that in a moment. And then finally, exhaustion. When your body physically, psychologically cannot cope with the stress you're facing anymore. You may also have heard this referred to as burnout. So basically, that stress is too much for your resources to handle. So first here we have alarm. And again, I won't read through every single thing, but please do on the slide if you're interested. Alarm is the very first stage. It's our primary defense when we're faced with a stressor. Our heart rate elevates, we may sweat a little bit. We tend to have greater activity of thyroid hormone, adrenal hormone systems, kind of that fight or flight feeling that you get when you're scared or when something suddenly surprises you. After that, we move along to resistance. So when the stress continues, when it doesn't just go away right after that initial alarm stage, our body tries to balance it. It has this stress and it doesn't know how to really regulate things. So in this stage, you get more cortisol release, which is a stress hormone. And cortisol actually breaks down tissues. So you might feel that you can't recover, that you're sore and achy, your body hurts. It's going to alter your metabolic and digestive function. You might have a lot of stomach issues, intestinal issues. All of that can be stress related. Next stage here, number 3, recovery. So if that stress abates, if it kind of goes away, hopefully you enter this recovery stage. It's the balance to that sympathetic dominance. This is where that sympathetic system isn't as active and the parasympathetic system can take over. So whereas before you were breaking down tissues, here you can repair and recover. You can return to normal metabolic function, digestive function. The hard part is that we face chronic stress so much, we never go to this recovery state. We are constantly under that stress. So we move on to adaptation. This is what we face when stress doesn't go away, when that stress is chronic. We might find that we have low energy, reduced pain tolerance, problems with our sleep, our appetite, our weight. Maybe you have that extra 5-10 pounds that you just can't seem to lose despite exercise, proper diet. A lot of that can be stress related too. It really affects us. And not just your body, also poor concentration, reduced motivation, some of those more negative emotions like guilt, irritability. And then finally, when we deplete all the reserves that we have to handle stress, we move on to exhaustion. This is basically where your body cannot cope anymore. You deplete your adrenal system, it affects your thyroid. You might seek other sources of energy. So if you're constantly going to that coffee, or if you can't resist sugar at all, your body's looking for quick energy. It's looking for some way to stay up and awake, despite all the stress that's been draining your system. So again, we have all those different phases here. I want you to think about if any of those are really relevant to you right now. Are you in an alarm state? Have you moved all the way down to exhaustion? Where do you fall in that spectrum of those 5 stages of stress? All right, so now a little bit of a deeper look. We've been talking about stress, about the way it negatively affects us, but not all stress is bad. In fact, we actually need stress to grow stronger and to adapt. So you can look at stress on a spectrum, going from eustress, which is positive, but then when you get past that certain tipping point, you might move on to distress, which is more of the negative side of stress. The key is to stay within kind of that positive side, going right up into that high performance area of the graph, but not tipping over where you reach resistance, adaptation, exhaustion. We don't want to talk about death because you don't want to get that stressed, but it's about finding that sweet spot right in that spectrum. And where that tipping point occurs, you don't really know. Depends a lot on the individual. Depends on your coping mechanism, stress you faced in the past, what sources of stress you have, your mindset, which we'll get into here in a moment. So I want you to think personally here. How are you responding to the stress you face? Do you notice the physical symptoms, the psychological symptoms? If you look here, you can see all the different ways that that stress can affect areas of your body, ranging from immune system, aches and pains, stomach cramps, problems with blood pressure, mood issues, and really see if any of those symptoms stand out. All right, so why is chronic stress so bad? Well, basically our bodies have evolved a capacity to handle short bouts of stress, acute stress, that whole fight or flight mechanism. We're being chased by a lion and we have to quick, get away, or hopefully not fight it. But that is a short, acute bout of stress. When stress is low level and chronic, our body doesn't know how to cope with it. Our environment has evolved far more quickly than our coping mechanism. We have demands from family, from friends, deadlines at work, technology. I mean, how many of you hear that ping of your email and you feel your heart rate come up a little bit because you're going, oh God, what am I going to have to deal with now? What fires am I going to have to put out right now? All of that is a stressor on your body. And so with chronic stress here, basically, as I was saying, our environment and our lifestyle is so fast-paced that we can't really deal with it. We have commitments to family, to friends, work-related deadlines. Our minds are so preoccupied with either future worries or past regrets that we're never really able to live in the moment, in the present, and enjoy it. Right now, you're probably thinking about something you have to do later on, or tomorrow, or this weekend. Or maybe you're regretting that conversation you had yesterday, or that deadline you missed. Basically, you're being pulled in multiple directions, and you can't just enjoy what you're doing right now. You feel that there are a million things to do. Everything on your to-do list is never ending. And so as I was saying, you can only last so long. Basically, your body has a set amount of resources to handle stress. When you're constantly stressed, it depletes key nutrients, B vitamins, vitamin A, C, minerals like magnesium, potassium, really affects your hormonal systems, thyroid, adrenals. Your body can withstand it for a while, put up its resistance, but after a while, can't do it anymore. Then you enter that exhaustion phase. And so the key thing here is right now you might be feeling like a victim of stress. Like you're bound to have all these things in your life. You can't really get rid of all of them. You can't just quit your job and go off, to a Hawaiian island or something. We'd like to, but it's not really a possibility. And if we have this more mechanical view of stress just really depleting all of our body's resources, we're kind of doomed to stay in that state. But if we take a little bit more of a balanced and holistic view, looking at how the mind and the body interact and how our perception plays a key role in our physical and psychological response, then we can actually choose to augment that and maybe even use stress to our advantage and not to our disadvantage. All right, so this is going to be pretty interesting here. We're going to talk a little bit about the power of perception and stress management. So you've probably heard of something called the placebo effect. Placebo deals with research studies a lot of the time and using an inert substance to test the true medication versus kind of that placebo or false medication. But placebo effect actually provides a lot more insight into how the mind works. something that we often overlook, but really, really shouldn't. We're going to get into that here a little more deeply with a couple examples, taking a closer look at that placebo effect. So placebos, as I said, they mimic the actual treatment that's being studied. However, they lack any of that treatment's active substances. It's kind of that whole sugar pill versus medication concept. And for many years, research essentially used that placebo as a tool to isolate the effects of a medication. However, research failed to kind of see that true insight that placebo plays into the power that our mind has over our body. When we're looking at these studies, we actually see significant changes in those that are taking the placebo. A lot of time they get similar benefits compared to the people who are actually taking a true substance. And you have to ask, if they're not taking any actual medication in, what's causing that change? What's causing their body to physically change in terms of hormone levels, recovery? What is going on here? And so in this case, we can kind of see that it's not the treatment that's causing a lot of these changes to occur, but someone's expectation of that change. It's your strong belief that that change will occur by taking this substance, this medication, that actually triggers your body to release certain hormones and to react in a way that you would get if you were actually taking the active pill. So we're going to look here at a couple key examples that really help to illustrate how this works. First, we're going to look at antidepressant medications. And so a lot of times with antidepressant studies, the placebo group, the ones taking the medication that's not actually an antidepressant, they will experience response rates of up to 50%, a result that nearly matches that of people taking the antidepressant. And a lot of times, a lot of new research is saying, do antidepressant medications actually function as well as we think that they do? Or is this more so a placebo-based response, a kind of mentally rooted response that's actually making people feel better? Another key example here is found in a study that was called Mind Over Milkshakes. Mindsets, not just nutrients. Not just nutrients determine ghrelin response. So in this study, I'll explain it a bit, and then we'll go into a little more deeply what it actually means. So participants were divided up into a couple groups, and they were served a milkshake that truly contained 380 calories on two separate occasions. On one occasion, these participants were told that the milkshake contained 620 calories, so way more than the actual 380 that it contained. On the second occasion, they were told that the milkshake contained only 140 calories, so quite a bit less than the actual 380. And so the response here, interestingly enough, ghrelin levels, which ghrelin is a hormone that changes in response to satiety. So basically, it kind of regulates appetite. It rises with hunger, it drops when you're full. And they measured the level of this hormone in people when they had that indulgent milkshake, indulgent in quotes, versus the very light, low-calorie milkshake. And the ghrelin levels, they actually dropped really, really significantly when participants believed that they were consuming that high-calorie shake. But they remained fairly stable when participants believed that they were consuming the lower calorie shake. So in both cases, the shake only contained 380 calories, but the participants' hormone levels changed based on what they believed, not based on the actual physical effect of that milkshake. So obviously this is really relevant because people are trying to lose weight, get more healthy, get fit all the time. So many people complain about having that last 5 pounds to lose, and you have to look at, is it what you're really eating, or could how you perceive what you're taking in actually affect those outcomes just a little bit more than you think? And so this leads us to a question of how do we harness this power of the placebo? Sure, we see this, it's relevant, but how does this actually affect us? How can we use this to our advantage? How can we increase the awareness of these perceptions and bring more conscious thought to subconscious belief? Every day we are faced with so many different things to take in, and your body has to, and body and mind have to really focus in and narrow what you're taking in so that you're not overwhelmed. If you saw or if you truly took in all the sights and sounds and sensations and things around you, you couldn't respond to it. It would just be way too much. So we consciously perceive just a fraction of all that stuff that's coming in to both our conscious and subconscious. And the problem arises when we have negative thoughts kind of playing in that subconscious, almost like a tape on repeat. Or I guess it wouldn't be a tape anymore, it'd be like a digital file or an MP3 or something. But a negative MP3 playing in your mind, saying that you can't overcome a certain stressor, that these demands you're facing at home or work are too much, that you're bound to just feel fatigued all of the time and you can't overcome this. If you have that constantly playing going on in your brain without being aware of it, it's going to negatively affect you. So you can think about it in terms of conscious and subconscious, kind of like an iceberg. The very top of that iceberg coming out above the water, that is what you actually perceive, what you're conscious of occurring in your day-to-day life. Whereas the mass of the iceberg there underneath that surface of the water, that's all the subconscious information, data that you're taking in, that you're processing, that you're attempting to cope with. That's where you're storing a lot of fears, phobias, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, all the things that affect you to a large extent that you may not completely be aware of, at least not yet. So now we're going to take a moment to talk about strategies we can use to combat stress, kind of the action part of all the information. It's great to learn about things, to see how it affects us, to see some of the supporting research for it, but how do you actually take that and put it into use to benefit and to hopefully kind of alleviate some of your stress symptoms? So when seeking how to combat stress, you need to take into account nutrition, physical exercise, potentially some meditation or mindfulness practice, and also ways to adjust your perception and behaviors. Basically, that's almost rewriting that subconscious part. How do you change that tape playing in your brain so that it's something more positive as opposed to something more negative? So first, dealing here with nutrition. We remember that stress depletes key nutrients, mainly vitamin C, A, all of the B complex vitamins, potassium, zinc, iron, magnesium. These are critical components for the immune system and hormonal systems to function properly. If you're already really deficient in these nutrients, stress is going to burn you out way more quickly than if you were fully stocked on all these resources. So one of the first key steps is to really take a survey of your diet, your nutrition. Are you taking in enough nutrients to give your body the key resources, the building blocks that it needs to really cope with all the stress you face? If not, that is one very, very easy step to take, one area to start focusing in on to hopefully kind of strengthen your stress response. And while nutrition, it cannot prevent stress from occurring, it can make you more resilient in the face of that chronic stress. Next, we move on to physical exercise. So remember that stress, essentially, it's kind of this fight or flight mechanism. It's this way that our body has adapted to deal with, sudden threat. And that's a physical thing. Regardless if you're fighting or if you're fleeing, you're moving. When we face stress in our life, we're stuck usually. We're at our desk, we're on the phone, we're getting angry, we're stuck in rush hour traffic, unable to move. Very little physical activity there. So by using physical activity, you can actually help to kind of relieve some of that stress, to kind of burn off some of those stress hormones that spike when you are under all of those different demands. Now, the important thing is not to go overboard, because you have to remember that exercise itself is a form of physical stress. If you are stressed by all of these more psychologically rooted things, and then you compile and add on a bunch of physical stress, doing endless amounts of exercise or stuff that's way too demanding for your current level, that could actually make things a little bit worse. And that could kind of speed that burnout rate just a little bit. So a good starting point might be to take a walk. Instead of staying at your desk, eating lunch at your desk, maybe you get up and go walk outside a little bit. Or when it's winter here and you can't go outside without freezing, maybe you walk around inside a little bit, or stand up, or even just take a 5-minute break from staring at your computer to stretch, to move. It's amazing how much better you'll feel. It gives your mind a break. It helps your body to release some of those more endogenous hormones that make you feel good when you exercise, all of your brain's kind of happy chemicals. It's a really good way to combat stress that will also help you physically too, help all the different areas of your body to become healthier, stronger, more resilient. After that, we move on to meditation and mindfulness. Now, you don't have to be some sort of meditation guru to do this. You don't have to sit quietly every day for 20 minutes, eyes shut, staring at a candle or something. It can be as easy as sitting with your eyes closed for 5 minutes, just trying to let thoughts come into your brain and go back out of your brain. Or paying attention to your breath. Breathing plays a huge role in our stress response. When we're really stressed, we'll tend to have more shallow breathing. We don't get enough oxygen into our system. It actually makes us feel more stressed physically when we have that shorter breath. So while you're sitting here at your desk right now, assuming you're at your desk, I want you to try to take in a really deep breath, 3 of them. Breathe in through your nose, let it come all the way down into your belly. Let your lower stomach kind of inflate a little bit. And then reverse that, letting the breath come back out, slowly exhaling out through your mouth. You can even put a count to it. So breathe in for about a count of 4. Hold for that count of 4. Breathe out for 4. Rest for 4 and repeat. That's called box breathing. So where you have kind of that in, hold, out, hold, if you think of the 4 sides of a box. And you don't have to go just for 4 seconds. You can go a little bit longer, not as long. The key thing is to slow down that breathing rate. Get more oxygen deeply into your system, because that will help to kind of physically calm some of those symptoms of stress and help to relieve some of the stress you feel mentally as well. A lot of times it's difficult to kind of change your mindset if your physical state is really ramped up and stressed. Kind of how you feel if you've had way too much coffee in the morning, how you just physically cannot calm down, you're talking way too fast. Same thing, you can use that change in the physical state to produce a change in the mental state and use it to your advantage, in a sense. Also dealing with meditation here, research into mindfulness meditation has shown that it produces measurable changes in parts of your brain that regulate emotion, memory, and learning. And those changes aren't limited to the brain alone. There are actually some studies that show that there's a change at the genetic level in genes that regulate metabolism, aging, and stress response. We won't have time to get into it super deep today, but all these epigenetic factors, not the actual gene, but kind of the switch that lies above the gene and can turn it on or off. So you might have a certain gene that regulates a response in your body, but if it's not triggered on, you won't see the effect of it. So meditation, mindfulness can kind of turn on some of those beneficial genes and help to kind of silence or turn off some of those more detrimental genes in our body. So we really do have some control over our genetic makeup, in a sense. And so as you're going through this here, thinking about when you could fit 5, 10 minutes even into your day, where you could carve that time out and take it just for yourself. Because regardless of how busy you are, taking 5 minutes to yourself, you can find a way to do that. be it first thing in the morning before you get out of bed, midday on your lunch break, in the evening before you're going to sleep. Really putting that into your calendar and honoring it like any other meeting, work meeting, family meeting, a doctor's appointment, giving that the same kind of time and focus that you would anything else that's important to you. Because ultimately, what are you without your own health and well-being? You can get all of these things accomplished, deadlines met, projects completed, but if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to really enjoy that whole process. You're just going to be looking at the next deadline, the next thing you have to get done, trying to get through it instead of enjoying the process of doing it. And then finally, dealing with perception and behavior modification. So really, how do you tap into that subconscious? How do you realize what you're telling yourself on that daily basis that you're not really aware of, and change that? And that's probably one of the most difficult parts. We can eat better, we can make time for exercise, we can set aside a few minutes for mindfulness and meditation. But getting into that subconscious, that's more difficult. There are some cool things for more of the tech savvy people out there, things that deal with biofeedback. So, for instance, you'll measure things like heart rate variability, and basically you can use that to see how your heart rate is changing, which provides a measure of your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system response. And if you just search online, you'll find a lot of different things dealing with heart rate variability, stress response. There are also some devices out there just starting to come out that will monitor brainwave frequency. And when you're in different brainwave states, that also kind of dictates how much stress you can experience. So from very high level, high frequency states like alpha, all the way down to more of the deep, relaxed theta type brainwaves, those will change too. And there's a really close tie between these brainwave states and heart rate, and kind of that heart rate variability. So I want you to start with the first three because they're way easier to implement. But if you are already like spot on with nutrition, exercise, you meditate every day, you might want to look into some of these more kind of tech savvy ways to see how your body's actually responding. Because once you're able to measure something, then it's a little bit easier to change it. If you have no way of measuring it, it's hard to tell if you're having a positive or negative impact. But once you measure it, then you can actually kind of work to adapt and change that response. So with that, we're coming here up to the very end. We're going to have a little bit of time for questions. So hopefully you have some good questions or something that you're dying to ask. And I think we're going to open that up here for questions right about now. Also, I have my contact information up there. So please, if you are interested in anything I've talked about or anything maybe I didn't cover that you want to ask, feel free to shoot me an email. You'll see my Gmail address right there, mork.sarah@gmail.com. And thank you very much for your time, too.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a great presentation on how we can manage stress. So we have a few questions here that we can ask. And if you haven't had a chance yet to pose a question, or maybe it's just a thought that you have around stress, please take the time now to enter a question into your question pane. And we see some funneling now. So we'll start with, is it possible to be in multiple stages of stress at once, depending on various scenarios?
That's a really good question. Typically, your body's going to be kind of in one stage or the other because you're taking in all these different inputs, family, work, all of that, and responding as a whole. But you could feel like you're getting more of a stressor from one area versus another, like it's affecting that response more than another thing. So typically, to kind of sum it up, you'll be in one stage at a time, but you might feel that different things in your life are contributing more or less to that stage.
Great, thank you. Next question, are there other stress hormones? And if so, which ones can be good?
Good question, too. Yeah, so stress hormones, things like adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol. And the thing is that these hormones, they're not really good or bad. It's when they're chronic and they never go away that it becomes a problem. everything kind of needs to fluctuate, and your body is always trying to find balance. So with cortisol, we tend to think of it as a bad thing. People say, oh, cortisol, that's going to make you store belly fat. It's pro-inflammatory. Well, if you go out and have a really difficult workout, you need a cortisol boost to actually kind of prompt your body to recover from that. It has a role. It's just when you always have that really prevalent in your system, you never get a break from it, that it becomes a problem. And same with the other hormones too. If you are always really ramped up over time, that drains all of your energy resources. So if you have like a short boost of that adrenaline kick out, you can quickly kind of get away or be more alert when you need to be more alert. Say if you're having to give a presentation, maybe your stress hormones spike up and you're really on top of things for a short period of time, but you couldn't do that for 12 hours. You just completely burn out.
Can you talk a little bit about exhaustion and burnout, and if there's a relationship to indecisiveness?
Oh, that's a really good one too. I actually haven't looked as much into a link between indecisiveness and burnout, but when you are exhausted, when you're in that burnout phase, it does really affect all of your mental capacity. Basically, you're not able to access more of those higher level processing centers of your brain. You move more into some of the more like reptilian parts of the brain, the older parts of the brain that deal with kind of instinctive response. And you're not as able to access the parts dealing with memory and more kind of cohesive, higher level thought. And some research also shows that chronic stress can actually shrink the size of your brain over time too. So it actually kind of harms the neurons and those connections within the brain. So that could lead to indecisiveness.
Could you mention again the nutrients that help combat stress?
Oh, for sure.
And would it be helpful as far as nutrition supplements? Is that something that someone should look into?
Yeah, so B vitamins are super important. All of the B complex, B12, B1, B6, vitamin C, A, D, and E. Minerals like calcium, potassium, magnesium, sodium, selenium, zinc, copper, cobalt, basically lots of different vitamins and minerals. And we tend to not take in enough to meet our needs. The RDA, you'll get enough to not get deficiency-related diseases, but that doesn't mean that that's enough to function optimally. So, ideally you'd take in all these nutrients through diet. It's always the best to get things from whole foods because there are a bunch of compounds we haven't even discovered yet that are synergistic, that help us to process and use these vitamins. But for most people, kind of a broad spectrum vitamin mineral supplement, it doesn't hurt, and it can definitely help if you're not getting a balance of those nutrients in your diet, especially with depleted soil that doesn't have the same level of minerals that it used to in the past. I know that I take vitamins and minerals, and I don't think it would hurt.
Where can someone find resources for meditation and mindfulness for combating stress?
Probably my first place I'd go is just a simple Google search, kind of typing in mindfulness meditation. I know that on campus here too, they have a mindfulness-based stress reduction program and MBSR, I believe. If you look on any of the university sites, like One Stop, and search for that, mindfulness-based stress reduction, that's actually a program that was developed that has a ton of supporting research. And it's been shown to really effectively reduce kind of the negative effects of stress and teach people in a very easy, applicable way without having to get really deep into meditation stuff, like just how to become more aware of the stress they're facing and how to cope with it on a daily basis.
If someone is practicing some of those strategies already that you mentioned earlier, but they're under extra stress, does that mean they should consider increasing the regularity of those strategies?
Yeah, I'd say it's hard because each person's individual. Some people may respond really well to just a couple strategies, with proper nutrition and exercise. They might be good. Other people might need way more support, just dealing with a whole host of individual factors. And I'd say that if you're feeling like you're doing some of these things, but it's not working, definitely look more into additional options. I'd say always start with diet and exercise because it's typically really easy. Or, it might not be easy, but it's something that you can implement pretty quickly. Once that is pretty solid, then look at adding in that mindfulness meditation. If that's not working, then keep looking to those more progressive, kind of higher level ways to change perception, belief, things like that.
What about yoga as a method of combating stress? And if so, like, is there a type or style that's better?
Yoga would be great. Yoga, it's almost kind of like a moving meditation. It's giving you that physical activity, you're moving your body, but you're also relaxing, and different types of yoga will focus pretty heavily on breathing too. There's some types, I don't know the exact names of them, but some types that really focus almost purely on breathing. And that can help, just like we were doing kind of with that breathing exercise, to physiologically relieve stress so that you're more able to cope with it physiologically and psychologically. So I'd say that if you like yoga, definitely. And you have to try to find the type that's good for you. Maybe going to more of a very more yoga focused facility versus just a gym that has the trendy yoga class, where you're just like lifting weights and doing yoga at the same time and not really caring about breathing or proper form. So try to find someone who's a good yoga practitioner who's going to offer, a pretty well-designed class if you can.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Looks like we got through those questions. Thank you for taking the time to answer those.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone has additional questions too that you think of later, please feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to send along resources, or, if I wasn't clear enough on something, I can clarify that a little bit further too.
Thank you. So, in closing, members of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association make initiatives like this webinar series possible. So thank you again to our members. We really appreciate you. You can help make our global alumni community stronger by joining as a member today at umnalumni.org/membership. This concludes today's webinar. Have a great day, everyone.